You win or lose together. Somebody might get shot. I might get shot. A sales leader might get shot. It's okay. But the understanding needs to be organization-wide.
So here's the title of our conversation: Selling as a Team Sport. Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today it is my pleasure to have Tracy Linne join to talk about all things sales. Tracy, welcome aboard.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. Great to be here, Lee.
Of course. So the first question, which catches many guests off guard because they haven't studied for this: who is Tracy?
Oh, that's easy. I'm a fixer.
You're a fixer.
I'm a fixer. I'm a fixer in sales. I'm a fixer in life. I'm a problem solver. So well suited to this territory called this crazy business of sales.
Crazy business of sales. Absolutely. So how did you become a fixer, Tracy?
Oh, time in the trenches. It's really easy when you think about it. Probably the signature for me has been pretty much twofold, either building young sales organizations, so there isn't a lot there, just coming out of the gate, new revenue motions, new people, process, and tech all at the same time. So complicated and, usually doing research on maybe upgrading what you've done before. And of course, every team is different. And every solution is different. So you got to match the people with the opportunity. And then I got really good at turnaround transformation situations. We're 10 years old. We're stalled. We're still under 10 mil in the SaaS business. We'd really like to sell this puppy and retire it sometime. We've probably are not going to go public because no one does anymore, but we'd really like to get some velocity back. Maybe we have some new ideas. How do we go to market from where we are stalled today to some future state? So building the alignment and culture around that with the executive team and then executing that and getting real results out of that. And that's not for the faint of heart. But it does make you an all-around player in terms of sales leadership, and it does expose you to just about everything.
So you're a polisher of diamonds in the rough.
Very often. And often, I might be sales leader number 7, 4. I have been 1. That's fun too. But in the middle, it's a little tricky.
Right, because others have gone before and screwed things up royally, and expectations have been built and shattered, and then you're just the next one in the line. And at some point, my experience is we have to push back on the stakeholders of, no, we are not going to do it this way again.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain boldness that goes with that first 90 days, and there's certainly an early bond that has to be created if it's still a founder-led organization about, okay, I'm going to call it the way I see it. And I'm also going to bring you lots of ideas and solutions, but this isn't my solution. We're going to build this and craft this together, not just you and me, all of us, because we all need to buy into this, and everyone's got a role because it is a team effort organizationally to execute and actually get to the result.
So in your experience, do you find that it's more adjusting the senior leadership's perspective on how the organization needs to go to market, or is it remapping the sales organization so that they're behaving differently, or both?
It's both. It depends. It's different with every company. I think my way is to have some really candid conversations early on before I even accept an engagement, whether it was full-time in the old days or now as a fractional leader, is here's what I think I see based on our discussions, and try and validate. It's a discovery process, right? So you're validating that what seems to be true is true. And change is hard. It's a change management issue. No matter where they are, current state is not the state they want to be in. So it depends on politics. It depends on, board expectations. It depends on realistic forecasting. It depends on the competition. It depends on understanding of how their go-to-market motion today, or motions, if there are multiple solutions, are working or not working, and how they're perceived in the marketplace. So you have to take a holistic view, customer first, team closely related to that, and then everything else kind of flows from there. But what's your real relationship with your customers? You've obviously got revenue, you've got here, you've done something right, you've been accepted in the marketplace, you've got a standing. Terrific, congratulations. They tend to forget that because they're in the foxhole by now, right? And so you have to bring that back out and discuss that, and then say, well, where are the opportunities for change in a positive way? And then you got to suss out everybody else on the leadership team and get their point of view on that. So I try and do that early with some touch base to see if it's an assignment I can do. Sometimes I'll say, I don't think I can do this. The dysfunction is too deep.
That's right.
Or I'll get a comeback. No, we're really good guys. It's like, okay, well, let's quantify that. And let's quantify what can be done with what resources and so on and what time. But it's a one-off thing. So I specialized in that because I'm highly adaptable. And, I grew up in an adaptable environment. My dad was a diplomat. I had to move every 2 or 3 years. I had to change and reinvent myself. And I found out I was good in situations that were ambiguous like that to survive. And it turns out there's a professional value to that. So, more than a dozen revenue teams later, it became my thing, hence the fixer.
Diplomacy and change management.
Yep, that means how you do it is critically important,
right,
to getting to some result. Because if you're going to rinse and repeat and do it again for someone else, it has to have worked. So it has to have had an outcome that was expected. Sometimes it was selling the company.
Right. The cats not only want to be herded, they have to think it was their idea.
Absolutely. And they've got a role. They all get their assignments.
I've met, the continuum of founders and company CEOs and owners from the sales-oriented, right? I just did some work with one who picked up on a phrase that I used in a value selling workshop. He popped in literally for 30 seconds into a sales facilitated session I was doing and heard relationship bank account. And in his closing the next day, he echoed that phrase. It's like, that's a win. I've had market-oriented leaders and CEOs. I've had technology-oriented leaders and CEOs. And I've had engineers who think that if you just add, 3 more units of sales, you get 3 more units of revenue.
At the end of the day, I find that the vast majority of people are looking for an outside perspective. So for some period of time, you bring that, and then you become part of the problem. And new ideas, right? So in a non-judgmental way, look at it quite analytically, and then break it into digestible parts that can be executed by, a sensible plan. And don't boil the ocean. Pick a few things, start there. And often those few things are what I call foundational things. So the assignments, no matter who the company is or their situation, we go back to stripping it down. So whatever is in place today, strip it down and understand how it was built, what all the components are, and then build it back up, potentially removing some of those components or swapping them out. It could be something in process. It could be something on messaging. Depends what the root cause issues are. But without understanding the components, you can't adjust it, change it, fix it, tweak it, radically modify it. You have to actually understand that. So this type of assignment is really only going to appeal to people that roll up their sleeves and get involved.
Right. So do you find that you're a pattern matcher, that you see patterns, you see behaviors that are consistent across, this happened at this account, it's going to happen at that account? Do you see those patterns happening?
Absolutely. And one of my specialties is around the people side. I can see just through observation behavioral patterns of the culture of the company. So I can see this is a very analytic team. So they're totally data-driven. They're going to thrive on a conversation with numbers. They might also be visual related to that because they like to see the data represented in certain ways. And then there are people that are totally, less so in our business, but totally relationship-oriented. And they actually want to sit down with you and see you face-to-face and engage and maybe, break bread, have a meal, things like that. But understanding that early on, and usually leadership traits come from personal style. In order to engage in the first place, you need to understand that. But from that also is the opportunity to build a playbook that's going to stick because you're speaking their language.
It amazes me how dysfunctional going organizations are. I did some fractional CRO work for an organization that only sold indirect, only sold through partners, and yet 20 years in hadn't developed a formal partner program. And so that was like after I unpacked my laptop, which, essentially involves flipping it open, I said, okay, let's build a 3-tier partner program, platinum, gold, everybody else. Here's what they get as a platinum, here's what they get as a gold, and everyone else can aspire. And so rolling out kind of the nuts and bolts of doing business in an organization that didn't have those, like that was a quick win.
That was clearly an organization that had no systems per se. It was very transactional and opportunistic, right? So they were responding in the moment to an opportunity that presented itself, chasing whatever presented, which is not a really great way to run a business and highly risky.
And by the way, this is a company that builds things. If what you sell is a software license or a subscription, it's easy to do that. Relatively. If you actually have to build something and ship it and require subcontractors to build components for you before you can build and ship, it's progressively more complicated to run off the cuff. It's fun. It's why I do what I do, because sometimes some of the challenges are so obvious to us outsiders. And sometimes we really have to get in and see, as you said, Tracy, it's the people and process that is what drives success or challenges. We have to get in and look at the personalities and the interpersonal interactions and the processes that facilitate or get in the way. So I'll ask you this question. Feel free to decline. And if you do take me up on it, feel free to leave the names of the guilty out. Tell some stories.
What kind of stories do you want?
I don't know. What kind of stories you got? In the interest of education, what are some things you've run across that organizations should know better about or do differently or never do again or do more of, right?
I think that the biggest communication challenge, and when you look at when alignment falls out, there's dysfunction either among the leaders or disagreement about how to go to market because it's not particularly working well. The bad behaviors appear because it's resistance to something going wrong. And so I think the stereotypical, if it's an engineering-led organization, a founder-led, a technical-led organization, and that built a great solution, great product or series of products and went to market, somehow the reality of sales leaders, sales culture comes from Hollywood. Sort of like used car salesman, it's a black box I don't want to know, or
the hero syndrome.
Yeah, or the hero syndrome. And then, if we go back far enough, back in the day, I show up. Who's this little chick, who says she's a sales leader? There were none in small companies and startups. Right. There were definitely in bigger organizations. And I found that I just needed an environment with more innovation. And because I came up through the ranks, I was a little more able to deal with that. But with me, I tended to bring culture around, hey, let's talk to the other folks in the organization. Let's not live in a siloed world. Yeah, that had never happened before. Reach across the aisle, have a conversation. Marketing, we're going to lunch every week and coffee 4 times a week and so on. So it was building bridges, to have those conversations. So it was a pattern interrupt on behavior of sales leadership, which started all kinds of stories, like rumors about me and, my latest vacation with my husband and my family would surface, really personal details.
Yeah,
which
totally
is
inappropriate. Yeah.
Not inappropriate, but it was fine. But the reason they surfaced was this curiosity.
Oh,
they'd never seen an animal like me before. It's like, she's just like the rest of us. And then I would get invitations to different kinds of events, like come meet our biggest customer, come meet our board early before I had done my due diligence. And it was because I was like an anomaly. I was like, it was kind of show and tell. We got one of these a long time ago, 25 years ago. So what I learned from that, and some funny stories, which I won't tell here, is
oh, darn.
You're always on. You're always under the spotlight. And I taught the teams that I built or transformed, I taught them to similarly understand they are always on and being scrutinized, because we were. Whether it was a public company that was failing and was reporting financial results, on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on what was going on with them, you have to assume that everything you're doing is being highly scrutinized all the time and to be transparent about that, which is a different way to operate than whispering in the corners before the forecast meeting to make sure you get your story lined up because it's a story. It's not reality.
We can spend a lot of time making shit up. It doesn't drive the business forward. It's just friction reducer, but it's not a revenue enhancer.
So related to that, what would usually happen was there would be some emotional event in those first 90 days in all of these smaller companies where I would sit down and say, here's what I found informally and so on. And we can fix this, but we got to take a step back to take a step forward. What does that mean? It means you're going to miss the quarter. And we have to bite this bullet now. And here's how I'd recommend doing it, but I'd like your input on implications. There's some things we have choice over and some things we don't. Like you have the wrong team to sell this kind of product. That's a much bigger problem because there's time associated. To, your messaging's wrong, or you're selling in the wrong geo, or you're selling to the wrong buyer, or you're not selling to the buyer at all. Those are more process and messaging changes. So that was always a huge disappointment because there is this hero, someone's come in to save us on the revenue front. Mm-hmm. We don't know why we're getting the results we're getting. And you'd have to break the news.
It's like going to the doctor and, the patient says, my arm hurts. Well, the patient doesn't necessarily know why their arm hurts. They can just describe some of the symptoms, and they don't even see that the back of their arm has turned blue. They just know that their arm hurts, right? And so it's the doctor who says, I'm going to run some tests. I'm going to come up with a hypothesis and then a diagnosis, and then I'll come up with whatever addresses the situation. Many times the patient says, my arm hurts, and here's what you should do about it. It's like, hold on there, Nellie. You're the patient.
Yeah, I'll give you 3, maybe 4 companies that fit this profile where they actually had I would say, mid-market sale, but it behaved like a not terribly complex enterprise sale. In other words, the solution was across the enterprise. It didn't have the sales cycle of 8-9 months of an enterprise deal, but it was selling into mid-market. And they were selling it because of their investors as a 20, 25K, old Bain velocity sale, transactional. Let's just sell these little transactions and, land and grow from there, and we'll get on the board and we'll develop from there. Well, some solutions are just not designed to be sold that way, and they actually get replaced unless they're top of mind as a more integral part of the business, solving a business problem. I can think of 3 examples where I said, nothing wrong with the product, nothing wrong with what you're doing, except you're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars per quarter on the table.
Right.
This thing needs to be priced at 70 to 80K. You add 60 days, maybe less, maybe 45 to the sales cycle, change your messaging, and change the title that you sell to. Yes, you're going to have to get another signature on sign-off to get this approved, but it is so worth it because your value as a solution to solving a real pain point, Sandler pain funnel kind of pain point, that you'll thank me later, I promise you. And that was the case. It's that they had tried to model the business after what investors wanted instead of what they had originally built. So somewhere between the very beginning where product design happened, this change on their side, they modeled to their financial needs and devalued the perception of the solution when in fact they were solving significant problems. And these were kind of customer-facing, front office kind of apps, analytics systems. One was a net promoter. One was a little bit more about security on the final mile in, hospitality industry, things like that. But that was a real eye-opener that they could increase the price 3 times and have double the sales in the same period. And then all of a sudden you go from 7 sellers to 20. And significant hockey stick growth, consistent, predictable.
It's counterintuitive, in part because the executive team said, hey, we've been selling the crap out of these and quickly at $25,000 a pop.
But you weren't sticky.
Right. No visibility and lots of churn. It reminds me obliquely of a story. I was a young analyst at IDC doing channels research, and a very large account hired us to do a complete market modeling for them. And I sat around the table. I was the young'un in the crowd, and everyone else, all analysts whose names were highly recognizable at the time, they all said, well, I can build a market model for my part of this, it's hardware, software, services, mainframe, mid-range, blah, 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 like 10 of the biggest product areas for IDC. And each one, it'll take me 3 months to model this, and I don't know, blah, 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 X number of man weeks. And finally you got around and someone said, okay, what about the channels piece? I said, well, it's funny you said that because I have all of your data in a spreadsheet plus all the channel stuff. We could deliver it this week. And someone looked at me and said, shut up. It's got to look hard.
Yeah. Well, I got the idea on those 3 cases, guess what, from the customer, right? A couple of conversations with the customer. How valuable is this to you and why? The best customers, right? And they were able to articulate the business value in a way that everybody understood but hadn't replicated and systematized.
You have to ask the question, what's the business impact for you? Not bottoms up, what did it cost us to build, right? Top down, what's the business impact to you? And what's the positioning and who should care about it? Sometimes it's sacred cows. Sometimes it's just, well, it's the way we've always done it. When I took over the CSO role at By Appointment Only 15 years ago, the first thing I did was to change the modeling in Salesforce. The default was if you move an opportunity from one stage to the next, the confidence level gets incremented as well. So you go from stage 2 to stage 3, it goes from 40 to 60%. And I said, no. I want to know from the rep's mouth what their confidence is on a given opportunity, no matter what stage it's in. We made that administrative change. And then about 5 minutes later, a young salesperson came in and said, kind of pulling on my sleeve, Mr. Levitt, Salesforce is broken. Why? Well, because I just moved an opportunity from stage 2 to stage 3. Congratulations. But the confidence didn't change, and it always changes. Right. I want you to put in your own confidence. And she said back to me in all seriousness, but that's not how we do it here.
Well, at least somebody they paid attention to it, right? But I have divorced those 2 before, and you learn so much about that particular organization and the people that are accountable for those opportunities. But even further, if you go a step further, what is the conversion rate per stage?
Mm-hmm.
So I used to obsess around this. So discovery with the type of selling that we were doing was everything. Yes, of course, you needed, good qualified leads coming in that were suspects. But the ability to actually look at and measure the conversion rates and where it's stalled, right? And then that's your opportunity later to come back with improving, optimizing that for velocity, right? But if you don't understand the time, but also how that confidence would change, then you wouldn't see the failure points. And you needed to understand the failure points because was it garbage in? Was it managing the deal? Was it misreading the deal? And once you could get a standard going that everyone adhered to on that, then it was much cleaner to see what was going on from an analysis standpoint.
Tracy, that's been one of the most overlooked leverage points in sales since I first started looking at this stuff. And Rich Vansel and I presented on this decades ago. He ran the marketing research at IDC. And at the time, I was an independent consultant. And we presented on this together of, you can spend $100 on new opportunities, new MQLs, or you can spend $100 working on conversion rates and velocity and stage. And the latter will give you probably 100x the return.
There's a tendency for all organizations, all sizes, except maybe really large enterprise deals in large organizations where there's a team selling that enterprise deal, as you've been involved and I have in my past. There's a tendency to set it and forget it. So when you get past discovery and you're actually in the process, the rep's got it. Their rep may have an SE or consultant or somebody shadowing the deal or available to them. But the reality is, after discovery to actual closure, that's usually the fastest way to shorten the deal, and also where some of your best resources can dip in and actually help, whether it's from a technical standpoint or just a plain negotiation or expectation setting, right? So that instead of serially looking at these, stage by stage, running all these processes parallel so that the legal and the compliance and all these other things are happening while the actual conversation is occurring, to move along as expected. There's, you can probably shorten a sale by 20, 25% by paying attention to that, and then improve the quality. And then here's the most important part. In those forecast reviews, guess what? Everybody knows what's going on in that deal. It's not the rep's call. There are eyes on it, which means you learn as a team, as an organization. You learn what good looks like. You learn what bad looks like. You learn what lying looks like, right? So again, these are behavioral things to get to the honest truth. If you're going to miss the quarter, know early and often. And then what is your salvage plan? Right. I have seen, mountains moved to fix a deal, but you can't do that unless you're honest about the risk.
And I've seen the flip side of it over the past couple of years where large organizations try to pull in deals from quarter to quarter and more, where large enterprise buyers, when we're talking about $50 or $100 million relationships and several $1 million individual transactions, they just say, I don't care about a 40% discount. It doesn't fall within my implementation window. I don't have the resources to take advantage of that discounted offer right now. And we'll take the discount when we're ready for it. So you just screwed yourself. I coach individual salespeople. Yeah, you have to listen to what sales management is saying. But if you're starting to throw Hail Marys at the client so that you can win that deal because your management wants you to, you're actually making withdrawals from your relationship bank account. And now you're hurting yourself in that account long term. Instead, tell your management they're not ready and stick to it.
I still do occasionally, but I used to assign everybody on the executive team to some pipeline. So early in the process, even if it's just a check-in, you're developing a relationship at multiple levels. It's very important, even if it looks like a standard deal, but maybe it's a logo that you care about or it's an area that you want to get into. This broadens understanding about the changes that you're making in the sales process. It also, again, makes it a team selling event, the knowledge base. All of a sudden, people in product say, wow, I didn't know that's how they viewed that particular capability. We need to play that up or fix that or so on. So you win or lose together. Somebody might get shot. I might get shot. A sales leader might get shot. It's okay. But the understanding needs to be organization-wide.
So here's the title of our conversation. Selling as a team sport.
It is a team sport.
And it's a contact sport too, by the way.
It is a full contact sport. And being vertically challenged, I have to work extra hard at that.
You and me both, sister.
This is true.
So people, process, and what was that there? Oh, right, technology. People are so enamored with the technology. I remember several years ago, Nancy Narden published the map of sales technology, and there were 1,000 logos on it. And how many technology platforms does a sales organization need? 4? 3?
Yeah, I think the last one I looked at was well north of 6,000.
Yeah.
And some of those are disappearing, by the way, and AI is gobbling up capability. And so we'll see many changes to that. But we're in tech. And so we're enamored with shiny things.
We are enamored with shiny things.
And we are in another phase. It's a major phase, no doubt about it. And I think it's great that many things can be automated and should be automated. And I hear, newer salespeople earlier in their careers terrified of this. And I said, no. We've been through these cycles before. What you need to understand is it's an opportunity for you to rise up to higher skill capabilities. And so some of the things that you will do in your career, the path that you take, will be a little different. And you'll have acceleration where perhaps some of us didn't at various phases. But you're also going to have to get a whole lot deeper on things like, actually vetting the fit of the solution. You're going to have intelligent conversations as well as automated ones to understand actually the value of that fit, if it's well understood in the organization, the adoption of it, the human promise of supporting it, the trust that's built because of that, and the opportunity to expand that relationship. And those are distinctly human traits, and you can get very good and more specialized in certain areas, especially if you're selling a transactional widget. That's not necessary, and that's not where you want to be as a seller.
I'll have my chatbot call your chatbot.
Exactly.
It can negotiate based on spot pricing and inventory.
Exactly. And that's not a career in sales. So I think change is confusing to many people. And actually, this is breaking alignment right now in many organizations because there's no discussion about it. And so there are a lot of career salespeople that are uneasy about meeting their assignments because their assignment is changing, their tool set is changing. And when they perhaps used to be, especially experienced sellers, more consistent on evaluating how much money am I going to make next year? And the family's saying, are we going to have a good year or a bad year, mom or dad? The answer is, I don't know, right? So we'll see what the numbers look like. So I think there's a sort of a dull to the glow right now based on confusion. That can be fixed by leadership. Have a conversation that says, yep, we're changing. We have to change or die.
Yeah. So that having been said, Tracy, what keeps me up at night, and I mean that seriously, is 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a salesperson would know book and verse about their customer, how big they are, how many employees, how much revenue, how many operations, how many industries, who they sell to. Today, many salespeople are chat GPT jockeys. If they've got 5 accounts, you ask them, what's the revenue of your 4th account? No idea. What business are they in, right? There was an old story going around about a rep that went to call on State Street Bank and said, I'm here to change how your retail operations work, your bank outlets work. It's like, Sonny, we don't have retail, right? Didn't know the business at all. And so today I see too many salespeople prepping without understanding. They gather information. They can't put it into a framework and use it to their advantage. They might recite it, but if they have to pivot, they're done.
So let me ask you something. You're in the business of, organizationally coaching around these things, around enablement, and also individually coaching individuals. And you presumably have some very experienced sellers that are enhancing their skills and making sure that they're on the power curve. What would you say is the key differentiator for those that are super successful in how they prepare?
Oh, and how they prepare.
Let's use research because it's a good example.
So how they prepare is a component of how they engage. They use preparation to help them create a point of view or a business value hypothesis that they've onboarded in their heads and really understand and can defend as though it was a doctoral thesis. Not the, I read this and now I'm going to recite it, but they really grok it. They really understand it. And part of it, Tracy, is they talk with 15 coaches or lower level people, and they take stuff that meshes with the research and they take stuff that conflicts and they sort it out in their head and then they go test it. So they don't take any research they do as gospel, right? They don't recite it, they own it. Then they have to be some combination of great listeners or empaths or great relationship builders or all three.
So I would agree with that. And you use a term grok, which probably some people on this listening don't understand, but I do understand it. And it is
they can Google
the ability to synthesize all these inputs, these data points. Let's go a step further. One of the things, that I help clients with is getting personal on that, again, on this people pillar, but not just inside the organization. So if you're synthesizing this point of view of how you're going to approach this account with your wonderful solution and how it's going to solve a major problem for them, there's another level where you can use, for example, in my case, the Crystal Personality Platform to actually look at the people you're meeting with, the executives, even if it's just a single person for a discovery call. These days, it's often a small team, right? So you might have a technical person, a business person, and an executive, maybe that pops in or out, but isn't there for the full time in a demo, that sort of thing. You can actually, through publicly available information, like LinkedIn, add that to your prep. So you can see the personality type, both in looking at footage of them online, as well as how they're going to respond and receive your point of view. It's better than intent data because this is personally driven off that individual. So if it is a highly relationship-oriented person, that's perhaps the host on the prospect side, you can play to that. If it's a highly analytic person, you can play to that. If it's a rather shy person, you can draw them into the conversation. It's the skill with which you manage conveying that information so that it's an absolute conversion, assuming they're qualified in other respects, financially and so on. absolute conversion as a clean opportunity coming into the pipe. That's golden. So the opportunity to win on that first engagement, again, assuming your other criteria is up to par, but also to bond.
Right.
You're saying something that they're receiving really well.
You're using their language of value.
You're using their language of value. You're connecting. You're connecting enough to move it along. That you've wiped out possibly 3 calls and done it in 1. You can also later analyze the video recording and share that, of course, from the perspective of how did that person engage with you personally by their type of personality. It also guides you on how you're going to respond in writing to them based on their style. This is a netted out person that basically just wants the facts, get it down. You said how much it cost, how long it would take to evaluate, what the team would look like, get in, get out. Or this person needs a document or diagrams to carry around and socialize the organization, so load their lips and give them the tools to do that. Again, this is AI driven intelligence. I think it's almost more than 6 million daily users of Crystal now. So it's a huge data set. It's the largest data set in the industry.
That's cool.
Which means the accuracy of it and the usefulness of it is very high. It's not a new tool. It's been around more than 10 years. So that's why I chose them, is because the maturity of that, based on the criticalness of the mission in turning around or fixing an environment or building a new one, you need a high success rate.
I love this. I've used the example of the CSI profiler.
Yes, very much so.
It's understand the personality profile of the individual and of the organization, because the organizations have languages of value as well. But it's understand who they are, how they represent themselves, and say this crassly, what buttons you can push. And Tracy, I'll give you an example where you'll miss things if you don't go the extra step and look under the rocks. And I'll give you the example. One of my favorite high performers was calling on 2 people at a mutual insurance company. And in preparation for her meeting with them, we took a quick look at the LinkedIn profiles of these 2, and she found something. Both of the women were AVPs, and they'd both been with a company for over 20 years. That wouldn't show up in her personality profiling. It wouldn't show up if you asked ChatGPT, right? It was gumshoe research, right? And so she started off the conversation. Listen, I know we're here to talk about, I can't mention the company's name, but it's a 3-letter company. But first, I have a question for you. You each have been with this company for over 20 years. What keeps you here? Truly curious. That started off a 20-minute conversation that led directly to the introduction of the rep to the new CDO at the company, who's like the number 2 at this company, because she found something interesting and she was curious.
Unfortunately, it's rare that somebody does that and finds the thing, which is the linkage to the person. But you just have to constantly be a curious person.
That's right.
And you won't always be rewarded, but you will always be better prepared.
Oh, you'll always be rewarded. Always. Every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time.
So the automation of some of these things, the volume of data, the expanse with which research can be done and served up to you, that is not synthesizing it. It is capturing it and presenting it to you. We, the humans, have to take this and sift through this, and you certainly can't regurgitate the whole thing. What are the nuggets that I'm going to use in this call with this particular audience and these people and these profiles, and how am I going to tune this to get to a successful conversion to the next stage of the sale?
And you have to make it personal. So, for instance, years ago, I was interviewing, and I missed the fact that the guy I was interviewing with, he was a very senior guy at a well-known company. I missed the fact that he published a blog about mountain biking. Well, I happen to be a cyclist too, and that would have been a perfect, oh, by the way, I read your blog, and I really like what you said in, your spring version, right? If I weren't a cyclist, I couldn't say, hey, I see you're a mountain biker. Yeah, I am. How about you? I'm not. Right? So,
Right.
when it's personal, it's even more powerful. It's interesting stuff. Tracy, what message would you give to sales leaders today in this crazy environment where there are a lot of uncertainties in business and in the economy more broadly, and there's a lot of push to get stuff done now to get sales landed this year? What would be your recommendations as to how aside from hiring you immediately as a consultant or as a CRO, short of that, what recommendations would you give them?
I would just say, because of so much of the turnaround work that I've done, and also building work consistently, the pillar that gets ignored the most is the people pillar. It's because people don't know how to address people issues. And so as, process and tech change and adapt to, as we're seeing right now, the next wave of innovation, the people pillar, your team, your talent, how you optimize them to perform in however you define their roles or shared roles now with certain automated processes, continues to be neglected. And you wouldn't go to market on emotion, flying blind on something. Why are you going to market flying blind on your team? Your team can be measured. It's a number. You can assess your team with a simple 20-minute survey. It gives a numeric value. Same way you score a lead. It's got a number. So why wouldn't you blueprint the team? Everybody, 20 minutes, here we go. Goes into a dashboard. Oh, look at what we've got. We've got certain strengths. We've got differences because we're human. We're all different. But we've also got some commonality. There are some, many overlap skills that will show up in behaviors in those scores for sellers. And there are going to be some outliers. Somehow they get it done. They don't look like everyone else, but they get it done a different way. You need to understand that because as things start to break, you don't know where to fix. And so if you have a dashboard and a blueprint that says in general, the other thing is when you're in a pressure cooker and Lord knows, go to market 24/7, 4 decades, you sort of want to know where you are at all times. And you also want to be able to plan. You can't plan if you don't have data that tells you where you are. So reorging. We're changing all these processes around selling that touch our customer and our prospects. And we need to look at the skills and capabilities and behaviors of some of our sellers and play musical chairs. Reorg planning can't be done without data.
It most commonly is, and you're right.
In a bigger company, HR will have some tools and they might give them or loan them out to the team. HR, a centralized function, will provide these. Operators don't necessarily have access to these tools, but they're incredibly affordable. Your RevOps team should be using, Crystal with some professional expertise so they can run these reports anytime they want. You're thinking about a reorg? Great. Let's see where we might move people.
Right. Let's see how we optimize.
So you can have control over this third leg of the stool from a data-driven way, just the way you run everything else in your business from a data-driven way. Then you have to use your management experience and your experience of your team, working with them. Somebody's going to leave us soon. We need to level up on the coaching. Let's see how this is going to land better.
Sales leaders do coaching?
Yeah, well, if somebody on the team might.
Is that
I always did it myself, but, all the mothers of those getting married, I'd get invitations to the wedding and they'd want to meet the sales leader because, first of all, they'd never seen a female sales leader. And then secondly, it's like, my son, and at the time it was usually my son, talks about you and you've transformed his life. And I said, oh, God, help us. I'd meet the new bride and forgive him in advance. We're going to have a tough year. But the point is, you got to get personal. You don't want to be in the bunker. You spend a lot of time with folks. You need to understand them. And more importantly, you need to self-actualize them so they take responsibility for themselves. When they have their own assessment, they understand themselves better. They receive critique and support better, and they will change with you more easily. Whereas you ignore all of this, they'll wander off. They'll go walkabout.
And let's take it from the other perspective. What's the most important job a salesperson has?
I think to continue to grow, to be accountable, and to be sure they're in a career track that they love. And the reason I bring this up is every year, some of the same organizations publish a survey that says roughly 80% of the people in sales shouldn't be. Depends what kind of sales. Are we talking about account management? Are we talking about net new? Are we talking about, channels, partners, so on? I think this self-awareness and self-actualization is the most important thing. And if they never get that, probably not a fit. Those that sign up for that and all that goes with that, doors will open because they will be curious enough to grow and learn in that career track.
Those that really embrace the title
as a profession.
Professional.
As a profession, right? So this is something I want to do forever. There's a lot I can learn. I've seen enough to think it's great. When I'm successful, I feel great. I'm well paid. I enjoy the attention I get for that. I think I'd like to be a leader someday. If they don't have any of that, maybe it's a milestone on to something else. I have reworked so many people, when it makes sense, into the organization in other roles, and they thanked me later. And others I've coached out of the profession completely with tremendous support. You're a tremendous person. This is not you. Because they came in with the graduating class from school and all their friends were there and they were SDRs and BDRs and they moved along to an account executive and so on. That's fine. But if it's your career, you got to take ownership of it, and you need to understand your place in the system, and you need to understand the system will always change, and you need to change with it.
I love your answer, Tracy, and it was a different answer than I was expecting and much more elaborate than I was expecting. When I coach salespeople, I keep it very simple, and I think your conversation is a much better one overall. My short version is your number one job, and they go, oh, to make revenue. No. Oh, to make customers happy. No. To make your manager look good. If you're driving revenue, if you're not causing trouble within the organization, if you're not calling people at the last minute, blah, 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 if you're not causing friction, if you are doing things you're supposed to do, you're making your manager look good. And the number one reason why salespeople stay or leave is because of their manager. Most people think, well, because of what I do. No, it's because of how you engage with your manager and make them look good.
So there's a personal philosophy behind what I said that's stood true.
And again, your answer was much better than mine.
So it's every day is a new day.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what shitstorm you're in, when you get up every morning, it's a new day, it's a clean slate, it's a fresh start. Who controls the start to that day? You do. So when you set as a very specific goal to launch each day, whatever floats your boat, a workout, writing a novel, a cold water plunge, it doesn't matter. Whatever works for you, you can control how you launch your day, which gets you in a mindset. That mindset is how you engage with anyone, your customer, your team, your manager, first thing in the morning. Remember the old Agile stand-ups? First thing you do in the day? That aura around you and how you present yourself to everyone else can be infectious. So you have an opportunity to influence through that. You may not feel that way 10 or 11 that night, but guess what? You get a reset every morning, and it's up to you to control what you can control.
3 of my favorite philosophers agree with you. Werner Erhard, who founded EST and then essentially founded Landmark Education, and then Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and my dog Max, who only lived in the present.
My dog's the name Max, too.
Yeah, there you go. It's yesterday's gone.
Yep.
If you pooped on the floor yesterday, gone. No issue. Today's a different day. If it's raining, he might do it again. But no, to live in the present, let go of what happened in the past. And by the way, this is what I learned from David Woolley, who hired me at Oracle. Don't make decisions you don't have to make yet. Lunch tomorrow, don't need to think about it. Lunch today, already done, right? And so focus on the here and now, right? The power of now, as Eckhart would say, and don't give any energy to things you can't control. And choose to be happy, choose to be powerful.
It also gives you the ability to recharge the energy for whatever that day brings. Anyway, it's advice I share with anyone that wants to listen because I think it works. The trick is to do it consistently, of course, like anything else. If you're working out, trying to lose weight, whatever it is, you have to do it with consistency. And then once it's a habit, you're good.
Right. Tracy, this has been a fabulous conversation. We could go on, and we will at length in other venues, whether it's at a pavilion dinner or some other venue. We've talked about a bunch of stuff, and here's some key takeaways. People, process, and technology will handle itself as long as it doesn't get overwhelming. Personality profiling as a tool for organizations to help manage people and for salespeople to better understand customers. And then curiosity as a key attribute.
And I would say also, anybody listening to this podcast, if they mention the Thoughts on Selling podcast and Tracy Linne at revenuemotions.com, and I think you're going to get a link to my LinkedIn profile, but the name is TracyLinne. Anybody that mentions the podcast can get a free assessment just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll make sure that happens, that you get a link for it.
That is very generous of you, Tracy. Much appreciated. This has been a fabulous conversation, and we'll talk again soon.
You got it. Take it easy, Dee.
Thanks, Tracy.
Take care.
Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.